Have you ever desperately wanted something to just go your way? Maybe it's a promotion at work, a clean bill of health, or honestly, just a lucky break. Well, you're not alone. Human beings have been wrestling with these intense desires for literally thousands of years. And throughout history, we've come up with some pretty fascinating ways to try and tip the scales of the universe in our favor. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really incredible historical and philosophical text. It looks at the ancient, deeply rooted human tradition of ritual offerings, and more specifically, a massive philosophical curveball thrown right at that exact practice. We're going to examine the moment where ancient traditions clashed with a radical new way of thinking. So let's dive right in. Now, let's ground ourselves in the physical reality of these rituals first. Because for centuries, people didn't just sit back and cross their fingers hoping for the best. No, they took action. Really tangible, elaborate action. The source text highlights a super relatable human behavior, which is the gathering of physical offerings. We're talking about carefully arranging incense and candles, preparing ceremonial pig heads, and crafting intricate baisi, which, if you don't know, are these beautiful, traditionally folded leaf arrangements. It's a totally immersive sensory experience. I mean, just think about the sheer effort, time, and resources it takes to source and prep all of this stuff. It's a very grounded act. People are taking everyday objects from the material world, things you can actually touch, smell, and build with your own hands, and bringing them into a sacred space to perform a ritual. But here is where it gets truly fascinating. There's this incredible contrast at play. We just talked about all those heavy physical offerings, right? The incense, the candles, the pig heads. But what are people actually trying to get in return for all of that? Well, through these physical items, people are basically pleading for highly abstract, totally intangible things. They're asking for overarching success in life. They're praying for wealth. They're begging to be healed from diseases or protected from unseen dangers. They're even seeking elevated social status and fancy titles. It perfectly illustrates what you could call a divine trade. We are essentially trying to take the physical weight of a pig's head or the smoke drifting up from incense and use it as currency to buy invisible life-altering concepts like health and prestige. It's wild when you think about it. We want the intangible, so we use the material world to plead for it. But then the narrative takes a really sharp turn. To get this, we have to remember that in ancient times, this whole transactional method of praying and offering, it was just standard practice. It was completely baked into the cultural and spiritual DNA of society. You want something? You make an offering. That was the rule. But the text introduces a massive philosophical disruption to this status quo. It brings in the perspective of the Buddha. And the central conflict here is that the Buddha explicitly and quite firmly challenged this deeply ingrained behavior. He didn't just suggest tweaking the rules of the offerings or changing the items used. No, he questioned the absolute bedrock of the practice itself. This is a huge pivot in the text, taking us from just observing a cultural norm to witnessing a really radical philosophical critique. So this challenge sets up a very stark theological dividing line. On one side of the line, you have the other ascetics and Brahmins of the time. According to the text, these spiritual teachers essentially guaranteed this transactional model. They'd approach the Buddha and double down on the traditional view, claiming that yes, these specific rituals and prayers directed at sacred things absolutely, directly lead to success. They validated the divine trade. But on the other side, you have the Buddha. The source text is crystal clear here. The Buddha rejected these claims outright. He completely separated his philosophy from the other spiritual teachers by refusing to endorse the idea that you could just plead with the divine, using physical items to get what you want. So we're essentially looking at two fundamentally opposed worldviews, existing side by side in history, clearly mapped out for us. The really crucial part here is exactly how the Buddha dismantled their argument. Because he didn't just say, nope, you're wrong, and walk away. He delivered what you could honestly call an ancient philosophical mic drop. The text gives us this exact incredibly powerful quote. The Buddha says to the Brahmin, "Brahmin, if praying to sacred things really brought success, who in this world would ever decline or fail? I really want you to let the rhetorical weight of that question sink in for a second." He's literally using their own logic against them. It's a beautifully simple but absolutely devastating counterargument. He completely bypasses the spiritual mystery of it all and just points directly at undeniable, observable reality. It is such a profound moment of critical thinking. Let's actually break down the logic of this because it exposes the absolute impossibility of the original premise. Think about it. Step 1, a person makes an offering and prays to sacred things for success or health. Step 2, We accept the guarantee promised by the other teachers that this specific prayer directly creates that success. If we accept those two things, we are forced into a pretty startling conclusion for step 3. Mathematically and logically, failure, decline, poverty, and disease would have to completely cease to exist in the world. Because if this transactional prayer worked flawlessly every single time someone wanted something, well, nobody would ever lose. But as you and I both know, just by looking around the world, decline and failure are very real, very unavoidable parts of the human experience. Therefore, that underlying premise, it just literally cannot be true. Ultimately, this leaves us staring right at one singular, incredibly powerful question. If prayers and physical offerings guaranteed success, who would ever decline? The text doesn't actually hand us the answer on a silver platter or tell us exactly what to believe instead, but it masterfully uses logic to wipe the slate clean. It challenges us to look way beyond the incense, beyond the candles, and beyond our own deeply rooted desire for a quick fix. It forces all of us to critically ponder the true mechanics of success, loss, and honestly, the human condition itself entirely on our own terms. So, if the divine trade doesn't actually work the way the ancients hoped it did, then what really drives our successes and our failures? It's a fascinating question, and for sure, one that's worth thinking about long after this explainer ends. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep asking those big questions.